Good morning. We have a very special treat today. Elle and Mark Bullard, who have been very active with us for the last 2 years since I met Mark at a King County prayer breakfast, are going to share their story of where they're at currently. And sometimes we get these cool moments to kind of peek into people's lives when they're maybe not neat and clean and tidy and all finished. And, we're always in the middle of a journey. And they certainly are. Elle mentioned a few weeks ago how they've been going to different conferences and meetings and trying to find their way, the next steps and how to live their best life with and for God. And Mark, being an entrepreneur, has some freedom in that. And we're excited to hear what's been going on, what God's doing with them, what they're thinking about, and where they might head next. So yeah, I'll leave you guys the time, and it'll be a fun storytelling and discussion afterwards. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Banked gave us the perfect intro of we're in the process. And so it feels a little, I will say more than a little uncomfortable to be presenting right now, because it doesn't feel like there's this clean, beautiful story to point towards of like, okay, this is what happened, this is what we learned from it, and here's this beautiful learning, because we're kind of in the midst of it and it's messy. So I guess thank you for that opportunity to experience something new, and have grace for us as we are kind of finding our way through it.
Well, if I may, I'm sorry, I won't interrupt.
No, please, I'd love this to be back and forth, because I don't feel as prepared as we normally are.
Oh, and that's fine too. I was going to share a little scripture. I'm doing this meditation with a group for Lent every week, meditating on a different word. They say last word of Christ. He had 7 things he said. It's not just a word, but this week it's I thirst. And you guys know when he was hanging on the cross, he said, Father, forgive them. He said, woman, this is your son. Etc. But I thirst. And then this week they paired it with Psalm 42. And if you read the Psalms a lot, you get the idea that the writer of the Psalms is always in the middle of life and doesn't know what's going to happen and crying out, And here, I'll give you 2 paragraphs of 42. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. My soul thirsts for the living God. When can I go and meet with God? My tears have been my food day and night, and people say to me all day long, where is your God? I remember how I used to go to the house of God under the protection of the Mighty One with shouts of joy and praise. My soul, why are you downcast? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God. Anyway, I wanted to share that. You made me think of that. So, that's our life. It's never, we walk in faith.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. That was the perfect beginning. So, as many of you know, we shared our story a couple years ago about the journey that our family went on in 2017, which took us to the darkest place of ourselves and then to the greatest riches of God. It was the best of times and the worst of times, and thankfully it ended on the best of times. So we praise God for that restoration of our marriage. And it was a wonderfully heady experience at the end of 2017. But then, and we had all kinds of dreams and aspirations and visions for what life would look like next for the Bullards after experiencing what we felt was a true miracle. And it totally didn't work that way. Like, not even a little. Literally 2 weeks after we reunited, after being apart for 9 months, my parents came to us with really devastating news of they were facing a health crisis, which we had known about, but was intensifying, but also a financial crisis that, without needing to go into whole details, was something that was entirely of their doing. And it was something that had been like decades in the making. And it was something that we had been trying to advocate for them to reconcile. So essentially they were in need of rescue. So instead of us having this opportunity to connect and with our community and minister and maybe share our story, we spent the next year, it was literally a full year, I would really say, of caring for them, of trying to unravel their finances, helping them sell their ranch. They're literally liquidating everything they had, trying to keep them cash positive. And that was all on the other side of the state. So we went through 6 months where we would leave Friday afternoon and come home Sunday night with our daughter. So that was exhausting. And then we immediately dove into, once that was somewhat reconciled, to completely gutting and renovating our guest house so that they can move in. And that was a move they didn't really want to make, but we didn't see any other options other than bringing them here. So that was a year, and feel free to add when you want to, but
Well, in November, when Elle and I were just reuniting, it was only 3 weeks later that her mom announced this big news. Meanwhile, also in November, I was starting a new job as the COO of a small software company. And during that same year that we were doing all this for her folks, Elle was working with me in this new company. So we were working together, which was actually really cool. But we were growing a company. We tripled in size and had tremendous growth over the course of that year. And it was a rocky startup road, as it is for startups. So it was extremely intense, right? Extremely intense. 2018 was an extremely intense year, and it ended in 2019 with what seemed like a wonderful outcome, and it was a wonderful outcome of actually growing that company substantially and then selling. And so that was exciting. It was rewarding. It was financially rewarding. So in 2019, we sold that company, and then we felt like, okay, now we're ready to do what we wanted to do in 2017. Elle's parents were ensconced in our guest house. We had sold the company. We had the financial means to take some risks, to try some things, to do some giving, which was important to us. And we were really excited, really, really excited.
Now we get to do it.
Yeah. And so we spent 2019 doing some really exciting things and getting the new business started. And so this time I was going to be starting my own software company. Previously, I'd always been working with others. And that's been my lifetime dream, total lifetime dream, to start my own company. And after 20 years, or really 25 or 30 years, I guess, in software, I felt like, okay, I'm going to start my own software company. So we got that kicked off in 2019. And then, of course, we all know what happened in 2020. So for us, 2020 was, of course, COVID. Trying to get this business going really had officially started at the end of 2019. So I was just at the beginning of kind of getting that kicked off at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. COVID comes along, smacks us in the face with the difficulties on the business front, but at the same time, unfortunately, Elle's father's health declined very, very rapidly, and all of a sudden he went to the ER one day, and 6 days later he passed. So he just his situation deteriorated precipitously. As to the extent that he passed right at the beginning of May in 2020, right when COVID was so fresh and new that everyone was scared to death of everything and couldn't go to the hospital, couldn't get in, just all those kinds of awful things.
No funeral. Yeah.
So that was kind of 2020 kind of, being a big challenge. So fast forward a bit there. Yeah, please.
So in addition, I would say that I was my healthiest self emotionally and spiritually at the end of 2017, but bringing my parents here was, like I said, we're in the midst of the story, so it's messy. What I now understand to be a pretty emotionally abusive childhood, and then bringing them here just really brought a lot of stuff to the forefront.
Yeah.
And so that was very difficult having them. We loved them. I was, my role in the family with them has always been to try and please them. And they very much did not want to be here. So it was sort of like trying to fill a cup that's unfillable. I was undertaking a task that was never going to be achieved. And so it was not a healthy thing. So my dad died very unexpectedly. That really sent my mom into some hard places, and it's not important, but it ended up just getting really hard. She left very abruptly. She sued us. It's been just a whole crazy set of circumstances. And we poured a lot of money into paying for attorneys for them, for their care. It's been financially pretty draining, their portion of the story. So in addition, raising a daughter on a single child with COVID, not with COVID, but during COVID in a school district that was out for a full year. And then when they did go back, it was just 2 hours a day. So she was really struggling with community and connectedness. And so that was another tumble of just intensity.
In the middle of that, she transitioned from a teeny tiny private school to a big normal public school. And that was another transition that was challenging because her first year was cut in half by COVID.
Yeah.
So she started as a 7th grader and then COVID hit during the middle of 7th grade. And we all know what happened there.
So basically, it's just been one thing after the other. The company didn't go where we had hoped. And
my company?
Your company?
Oh, my company didn't go anywhere. Yeah. So from 2019 of kicking it off to the end of 2021, eventually just realizing like this has completely failed. And it didn't even begin, frankly. It never really got started. And not for lack of effort. And some interesting things happened along the way and learned some lessons, I hope.
Yeah. So here we are, it's 22. Mark just took a job with a large company, and probably something that 6 months ago he never would have thought would be where he was, but it's been great in the sense of it's providing us some space to breathe. The tumble cycle is kind of finally, we're in the last few minutes, it feels like, of the cycle of we now have a chance to breathe and assess and sort of say, okay, where are we? I turned 50 in the fall. He's about to turn 50 in a week. And so we're sort of taking inventory of where are we? Where does God want us? And where are we headed? And we are both Washingtonians. We grew up here. We are passionate about our community. We've had a relationship with Bainbridge Island for 26 years now. It's been a long one, and we've always been we are people who are about where we live. It's not just where we happen to live. It's a deep passion for us. And what we've been finding over the last period of time, and it's hard to even put a finger on exactly when it started, is this where we're supposed to be? Which is a pretty, like for us, a pretty almost devastating question, because it's always been so who we are. We're very deeply enmeshed in our community.
Yeah, we didn't end up on Bainbridge. We chose Bainbridge.
Yeah.
And so that's been to then question that has been really hard. And likewise, same thing with the entrepreneurial journey. You know, my whole life have known that I wanted to start a business, and I felt like everything I was doing leading up to that, and then to have done that and have it fail has just had me question, like, was that what I was called to do? Was I trying to force something that didn't belong? or was it exactly what God wanted? Or was I doing exactly what God wanted? And this failure is part of the journey.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So those are questions that are going on. And yeah.
So I would say that one of the things that spurred it in particular is just what there's a lot of different factors, but what our daughter is experiencing at school is just deeply troubling for us. It's interesting. I think we've always thought of ourselves as, we've never identified it as we actually live in a really small town. And that's odd that we wouldn't have come to that conclusion. But I think because Seattle's so close and we're so closely tied with the city that we haven't processed, like there's one high school and there's not a lot of diversity in these kids, both ethnically, but also socioeconomically and politically. And so it's created, I would say, a fairly, this is a word that I think is overused, but I feel like it applies. It's created a pretty toxic environment that is entirely intolerant if you do not adhere with the fairly liberal mindset of where these kids are at. And to the point that you are really attacked if you don't line up with where they are. And there's just some really like a step. We all know high school can be hard. Like that's just part of life. There's lots of 80s John Hughes movies about it. We get it. But this is a different level of suffering and intensity than what either of us experienced.
Yeah.
And
there's a level of antagonism. And I wouldn't even call it liberal because it's not.
I don't like putting label on it.
It's not liberal. It's anti.
Yeah.
And so it's
very
just,
canceling.
Yeah, it's kind of anti whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm anti whatever you're doing that I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very intense. We've heard about that. Over the years, and I've always felt like, it can't be that bad. It'll be, by the time we get there, it'll be fine. Or other kids are weak, or other families are weak, or whatever. I mean, honestly, I've just been kind of arrogant, I think, about it, and not really appreciating the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And also I've heard that it's harder for girls than for boys,
Mm-hmm.
which again, I couldn't appreciate because I didn't really understand that. And I grew up with, as one or two boys, so didn't have that girl high school experience. But yeah, it's actually been every bit as bad as we've heard, and very difficult.
Just the fact that she literally doesn't have a single opportunity to have a Christian girlfriend. Like, how do we think faith is going to flourish in her if she doesn't have any safe harbor, right? So we've jumped into trying to fix it. We go to a church. We love our church. It happens bizarrely that our church is blessed with boys, hordes and hordes of boys. So while they can all interrelate and connect, that's not going to be your goodness, right? So we've started volunteering with Young Life and trying to do that, and trying to, basically, we don't want to be the people we want to be the change makers. We don't want to be sitting on the sidelines saying what's wrong with everything. And so that's just, there's a lot of arenas of where we're trying to do this, but that's one of them. And
connecting with other churches on the island too, just to kind of cross-pollinate and see, who else is in the community that loves Jesus, and to find other, young people and whatever. But it's a pretty barren landscape. One of the things I've always believed in is the importance of living in a culture, and that is different than you, and understanding the value of that. I went to a college that was very antagonistic to Christianity, and felt like that actually helped strengthen me, because we had a really awesome Campus Crusade for Christ group, and an InterVarsity group, and Navigators group, and other groups that really strengthened the Christians in that campus environment. And so I've always felt like I don't want my kid to go to a totally isolated, 100% Christian environment. But it's different to go to an environment that's 100% not Christian, and to not have even a single back to lean up against when you're in the fray, and
actually being attacked, like literally.
And then just constantly being really put down.
So we have, we're taking inventory, we're taking stock, and through that, trying to learn and to go out and see where God is speaking to us. I needed some replenishment. I felt pretty deeply depleted after the last few years, and so I've had the opportunity wonderfully to go to a few events that have been really impactful. The first was a Rhythms of Renewal retreat in Nashville that was taught by Rebecca and Gabe Lyons. Some of the fellas might be more aware of Gabe. He founded Q Ideas, which is a Christian thought symposium that occurs annually with the idea of that we as Christians should be well versed in the most pressing issues of the day and be able to engage them from a Christian perspective. So that's who he is. And it basically the concept, there's a great book. I have all my books here, Rhythms of Renewal. It's basically, it's topics that since time of old we have all struggled with, but it's looking at a way to live your life in a healthy rhythm of in the different quadrants, and that was wonderfully helpful. And they had a lot of speakers, and specifically this is the one I just want to say, if you haven't read this, you should put it on your nightstand sometime soon. Kurt Thompson is a really well-known Christian psychiatrist, and he was there at the retreat, and it's called The Soul of Shame. And it's, I don't want to, I wish I had the perfect thing to say about it, but I will, because it's so good and it's so deeply impactful. I will say that it really drills into the destructive nature of shame and how it is one of the greatest tools of the enemy to paralyze us and isolate us. And that it is one of the ways he most fully seeks to go after the community of God. And I love that it was a book that was an intersection of science and Christianity. He's fully both. And so yes, please add it to your list. It was wonderful. Then in February, I got the opportunity to go to If Gathering, which is a women's organization. So some of you may not have heard of it. It was founded by Jenny Allen a few years ago. And the whole concept is we are all ministers. And if God is true, what then should our lives look like? And she has just had this passion for equipping women around the world. And it has just been a skyrocketing path of growth among the organization. It's just, I cannot recommend it highly enough. So every year she has this event called If Gathering. It's watched by over 90,000 women around the world. And people gather in homes and churches to watch this event, and it's speakers. It's probably around 15. It's a 2-day event, and it's about 15 speakers that are just at the forefront of Christian thinking. John Mark Comer, Francis Chan, lots of names that I think you would probably be familiar with. The part that was so impactful for me was they do have a live event that you can attend, but it's sort of like winning the golden ticket of Willy Wonka. They only have 3,000 tickets and they sell out in about 3 minutes. So I won a ticket. I mean, I did pay for it, but it felt like I know, seriously, I was all in. I had 2 computers set up that morning, trying to make sure that none of them froze. I was very serious about getting to this event. And it was so restorative to my soul to be surrounded by a just 3,000 women that were just praising God. I mean, the worship music just was a balm to my spirit. To hear these voices in person was just awesome. It was a beautiful, beautiful time. Now we just got back from the Patterson Center, which was last week. And if any of you are familiar with it, it's been around for quite some time. Pete Richardson founded it. It's in Colorado, and it's a strategic planning and consulting group that works both with businesses, nonprofits, and individuals. They personally are people of strong faith, but they operate both inside and outside the church. And I was exposed to them through the different places I've been learning. A number of the leaders have been through this process of a life plan. And essentially, I'm going to let you jump in. It's a perspective-driven process that is over 3 days, where you meet with the facilitator one-on-one for 3 days. It's very intense. It's 10 hours of session a day. They even eat lunch with you. And then there's multiple hours of homework a night. So it is, by the end, you're just a little depleted, but full at the same time. So I'll let you kind of explain what the process is.
Yeah, there's no breaks.
Yeah, it
Like
is.
literally no breaks. If she goes to the bathroom, they keep talking.
I
to
was
me.
sneaking to the bathroom to check on the daughter.
And then when I go to the bathroom, they're talking to her. So it's like, yeah, there's literally no breaks. It's pretty intense. It's totally awesome. The bottom line is that they offer this thing called Life Plan. It's a 3-day super intense process, perspective driven, meaning rather than the kind of American, like we're going to go from A to B, it's more like we're going to approach from A and then we're going to circle around B multiple times to get different points of view and different views and different kind of insights into what's going on in our lives, to then kind of come to a more holistic view of what's happening. So the 3-day process is essentially day one is essentially kind of a where are we and a retrospective. So it's taking a look at what's right, what's wrong, what's missing, and what's confused across 4 different dimensions: personal, family, vocation, and community. And so we spent a good deal of time. That was some of our pre-work was to actually answer all those questions in advance. But then when we came in, we re-answered them in the context of each other and also in the context of understanding better exactly what they're talking about by these different dimensions. Then we also spent a good deal of time, actually a lot of time, looking at a process called turning points, where you're looking at all of the moments in your life where something substantial happened, you saw something, you said something, you experienced something that dynamically changed the way you think or act. And that, just going through that process and really unpacking and digesting it was extremely important, because you start to see like, oh, this is where I'm coming from. Like I do this now because of that thing that happened 35 years ago.
I'm going to interject one thing. One way they do this is they should buy stock in 3M. They utilize these enormous sheets of paper that are about 3 by 2 that are stickies. And each exercise you're completing and filling out these pages. And by the end of the 3 days, the entire room, it's like your life is on the walls. There's no wall space left. It's completely covered in the work that you've done. And that was just really powerful to see the unfolding of the process, but to see your life. I mean, you have a story in your head, but then to really see it in print, there's some clarity that comes from that and some perspective that is really life-giving, like really, really helpful.
It was also really, I've gone through some things like this individually, which is powerful for sure. But I'm not an individual. We are an individual. And so together, for us to go through it together and to see like where the rivers joined and what happened before the rivers joined, and then to see all the different things we've gone through together as a couple and as a family was really powerful. So the second day and the first half of the third day were all spent on kind of where we are now and kind of who we are. So looking at things like how are you wired? You know, what are your drivers? What are your comfort zones? What are your values? How do you think? What are your talents? What's your heart? So I just said a bunch of words, but we would spend like an hour, 2 hours on each one of those areas, really pulling it apart, and thinking about it and understanding, testing it. Like, how is that really who you are? Is that who you want to be? Who is that who you think you are, but you're not? What you really are is over here. And that they did a fantastic job of helping pull that apart. And then we were able to give each other insights too. You know, Elle's like, oh, Mark, think about that situation. And you're like, oh yeah, that's true. So
one thing I want to add is when we say it's a perspective process, the guy had our facilitator had a wonderful image of you're circling, but you're circling in tighter and tighter circles, concentric circles, so that by the end you've reached a very clear point of clarity. And it's sort of like doing a sculpture. You're going to do it from, you're not going to do it from one side. You're going to have to come at it from different places and get different viewpoints.
So I unfortunately need to check out, and Elle gets to tell you the rest of the story, but it's an awesome
Such
one.
a bummer, but
I need to take my daughter to school.
daughter has to go to school early for some testing stuff. So
Family first. Thanks, Mark.
I know, right? Family first. Yeah. So, and then basically the final, it's funny because you think you're going, the point of the program is called Life Plan. It's to align your calling so that you can make your deepest impact in life. So you would think, oh, well, that's what we're going to be doing the whole time. That actually is like the very last few hours of the program, because you can't make that plan until you more fully understand where you've been, who you are, and how God has designed you. So, then there's this final push into really bringing it all together, and it's pretty powerful. We kept teasing him that we felt like he was those magicians that do those shows where they're doing a painting where you can't really tell what they're doing, then all of a sudden at the very end they turn it upside down and it's the face of Jesus, or it's something really miraculous, and that's sort of how it felt. Is you were so deep in the process, you couldn't necessarily understand where they were taking you, but it was so thoughtful and intentional and really, really helpful. So there was a few books that we had to read. This is like, I feel like I'm doing my book show today. If any of you have not heard of this person, this is I will say probably one of the most impactful books of my life. It's by David Benner, and it's The Gift of Being Yourself. He wrote 3 books. They're very simple. It's sort of like Tozer. It's like, it's not thick, but it's really thick. And it's basically the concept of, you learn about God by gazing at him, but you also learn about yourself by gazing at God. It's about this interchange, and the beauty of truly knowing yourself is a way to truly know God, and vice versa. And it is a deeply beautiful, I cannot recommend these books enough. And then another one was, we had to read The Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which is a classic. Yeah. So where did this all take us? We had some pretty big takeaways. That's the whole point, is to spend all this time and to better understand who you are and how you can go out and make an impact in your life. And kind of the biggest thing that came out of it was feeling like we maybe are being called elsewhere. And that was sort of revolutionary. It was a very painful revelation, but one that we're taking very seriously. So he gave us a process that I'd love to maybe send some slides of a matrix to make decisions, and gateposts to kind of vet your potential decision making through, that is much more than just a pros and cons list. It's much more thorough. So we also came out of it of, one cool thing is this job that Mark just took felt like it was just a stopgap to give us some breathing space. But the more he looked at how it's gone so far and the company culture, he came away saying, you know what, as I look at all of my skills, and my callings, this job is a way better fit than I thought. And so that was a gift, like to go, hey, this isn't just where I'm punching the clock for a year while we figure out what's next. It still might be that, but in the midst of it, I can actually really lean into it and fully be myself. For me, I've kind of been in transition. I had worked with Mark, and then as we wrapped up the company, I worked with Mark in both of our last endeavors, but those were neither of my calling. It was more supporting and joining him and being of value, but not who I am designed to be. The last couple of years, I've been working with a number of organizations that I love, but when it really came down to it, in looking at the material, it became really clear that I want to do something of my own. That's kind of where my greatest talents are, is leading and initiating and starting. And so that's definitely going to be part of the next chapter for me, but that's going to have to take a little bit of a back burner while we figure out where the Bullards going to be hanging their hats, because it quite possibly is going to be somewhere very different than where we are right now. So in the moment, we are in the midst of deep prayer. We've committed to the next 2 weeks of listening to God. It feels like the matrix says move, but that literally, I can't describe enough. It feels like cutting off an appendage. It'd be like saying it's a big deal for our family. So the next 2 weeks is spent in that. And then it would be a period of going and visiting some other states and cities and seeing where God might have us, where we can be of greatest use in the kingdom and also be receiving. I think that's been one of the hardest things, is it feels like one of the key parts of this is you identify the 5 things that define your family. And one of our deepest values is knowing and being known. And it feels like that is not what we're getting in our community. And so wanting to choose a place that would be possible. So that's the story of where we're at. And I will say that it's been very interesting. We have never encountered a period of such adversity over the last 4 months. It's insane. Things have broken in the house in a way that has never happened before. Avery has broken her nose. She's broken multiple fingers. I mean, it literally feels like the enemy is just throwing everything at us that he possibly can. So it's sort of living with a sense of, okay, Lord, we can we can do this, but we can only do this through you, and we can only do this for so long. So I think that's what and the Wi-Fi this morning, Adele was reminding me, we woke up this morning to no Wi-Fi, which is completely inexplicable. So that's just an example where I think the enemy is trying to undercut us and distract us from pursuing this phase of learning.
Awesome. Thank you, Elle. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. I normally don't direct this very much, but I do want to make sure our guests and your friends, I think, Kate and Laura,
Kate came as well.
Get a chance. Laura, we have an open discussion, questions, comments, thoughts, stories. If you guys want to say anything, please feel free.
I now have a kitchen full of boys getting off to school. So it's very loud in my background. So I won't bless you all with the background noise, but it's been a gift to listen in today. So grateful for you all and what you all are doing.
Yeah, both of these ladies are in the process of launching kids to the school, and you all know how that time is messy. So
Elle, this is Dan. First of all, thanks for joining us again today. It's great to see you. Great to see Mark. Please give him my thanks